Amen. All right, a pretty significant event happened this week. One of Iran's top generals was taken out by a drone of ours. This guy, his name was Soleimani, I believe is how you pronounce his name. He was responsible for many American deaths in the war against Iraq. He was responsible for helping build sophisticated roadside bombs and things like that, actually. But anyway, so he was a pretty big deal. He was actually, people look at him or they think of him as the second most prominent figure in Iran underneath the supreme leader himself. So him getting taken out and dying is a pretty significant event upon the world stage. This is what Donald Trump tweeted after this happened. He said, Iran is talking very boldly about targeting certain USA assets as revenge for our ridding the world of their terrorist leader who had just killed an American and badly wounded many others, not to mention all of the people he had killed over his lifetime, including recently. And his tweet continues on here. Hundreds of Iranian protesters, he was already attacking our embassy and preparing for additional hits in other locations. Iran has been nothing but problems for many years. Let this serve as a warning that if Iran strikes any Americans or American assets, we have targeted 52 Iranian sites representing the 52 American hostages taken by Iran many years ago. Some at a very high level and important to Iran and the Iranian culture. And those targets and Iran itself will, in caps here, will be hit very fast and very hard. The USA wants no more threats. So obviously this has caused a backlash with the leftists and the liberals. You know, when Saddam took out, when Obama, okay, they're kind of the same. They both... But anyways, when Obama took out Osama bin Laden, all the leftists were cheering, thought he was such a hero, and the mainstream news outlets celebrated it, said, basically praised Obama as some sophisticated military genius for finally taking out Osama bin Laden. But when Donald Trump takes out a bad guy, a very high-profile bad guy. Now Trump's a murderer, he's an assassin, and all these kinds of things. When Obama assassinated many people with drones, and actually if you start researching it, you find out that the drone attacks that he was responsible for many times killed civilians and innocent people. He was very reckless and careless with his drone attacks. But Donald Trump has been very precise in killing specific people who are responsible for certain crimes while avoiding innocent casualties at all costs. So it's very nice to see a president that's willing to stand up and do something about our enemy taunting us and things like that. Because if you remember, I mean, what had just happened, I don't know if you guys saw it in the news, but you saw our embassy was burnt out in Iraq there. And that general was behind orchestrating those protests that led up to the burning of our embassy in Iraq. And he was also currently planning, as far as what they're telling us, more attacks upon Americans, and was on his way to a meeting with other militia leaders in Iraq when he was taken out. So, in other words, Donald Trump took him out in the act of planning more terrorist attacks upon our people. So it was by all accounts, from what I can tell, it was a very righteous decision to take that guy out, and no doubt it's probably saved a lot of lives, as well as helped thwart the Iran was trying to, burn the embassy as a symbolic thing to try to get Iraq to turn on the United States after everything we've done for them, and Donald Trump stepped in and put a stop to this. But a lot of people are afraid that, the leftists say, this is going to just cause them to attack us. And in fact, I was reading some tweets from some prominent Hollywood actors, and they were basically begging Iran to not hurt us now because of this, and they're apologizing And it's just crazy. And you see we got one half of our country that is totally gutless, totally spineless, that they actually side with our enemy, beg our enemies not to attack us. And when we have somebody who stands up and punches a bully in the face, they say, oh, how dare you do that? Now our bully's going to get really mad at us and hurt us even more. So what we're seeing among the left, both politically and religiously, is cowardice. We're raising a bunch of weak, limp-wristed cowards in America today. And that's why when Donald Trump comes on the scene, he seems like he's so rough and tough and mean. But really, Donald Trump really isn't that much different than the way men used to be. I'm not talking about the bad sides of some of the things he's done, some of the womanizing. But as far as his courage and his toughness and his grit, most men used to be like that in America. Now, when people see men act like that in America today, now they call them male chauvinists, toxic masculinity, and all these types of things, when it's really just a man being a man. So it's very refreshing. Now I'm going to tie this into Scripture like I always like to try to do in current events, and see if this world situation, try to apply it to the world situation and see what we can glean from the passages of Scripture here. 1 Samuel 17, verse 1. I'm going to go and briefly read some scriptures about the famous account of David versus Goliath. Okay, because there are some parallels here that I think apply to this situation that we're now seeing with America versus Iran. I mean, Iran's been taunting us, burning our flag in their streets every day, having these huge parades saying "Death to America, Death to America," and in fact, actually, I got to mention this: the supreme Iranian leader, the Ayatollah Khamenei. He actually, I didn't even know it, but he's got a Twitter account as well. And just about, I think it was last week, several days before we took out their main general. He tweeted about Donald Trump, and he basically said, "There's nothing you can do. You're helpless. We're going to keep doing what we're doing, and go ahead and try something." Baited him. Thinking that probably, see, the thought is Donald Trump will never have the guts to take out any of the top Iranian leaders, because he doesn't want to start a war with Iran. Of course, we don't want a war with Iran, but at the same time, if Iran is provoking us and killing Americans and trying to jeopardize all the work that we've done with Iraq, and try to basically control Iraq and then use that as a platform to keep gaining more power, something has to be done. Anyway, so 1 Samuel 17 verse 1 says, "Now the Philistines gathered together their armies to battle, and were gathered together at Shakah, which belonged to Judah, and pitched between Shakah and Azekah in," here's Ephes Dammim. Okay, a lot of nice long words there. Okay, so verse 2, it says, "And Saul and the men of Israel were gathered together and pitched by the valley of Elah, and set the battle in array against the Philistines." So I'm going to say this. We've, for many, many years now, ever since the Iranian hostage situation with way back when Ronald Reagan was president, we've been at odds with Iran. We have not been on friendly terms. And they've always been shouting back on their side, saying, "We're going to do this to you." And they keep doing that back and forth, and we just keep taking it. We just keep taking it over and over and over again. And it reminds me of the Israelites and how the Philistines taunted them over and over and over again, and nobody did anything about it. And did I read verse 2? Okay, verse 3, "And the Philistines stood on the mountain on one side, and Israel stood on the mountain on the other side, and there was a valley between them. And there went out a champion out of the camp of the Philistines, named Goliath of Gath, whose height was 6 cubits and a span." Okay, and what's interesting about this is this Soleimani guy was known as the champion of the Iranian people. As far as, he was the second, he was basically, you have the supreme leader who's in control of everything over here. But this Soleimani guy, he was the guy that carried out all of the major military acts for Iran. So he was, in all purposes, he was their champion. And now in fact, they're in the streets mourning him right now, getting all enraged and getting on their loudspeakers, chanting "Death to America," and "We're going to get you back," and all this kind of stuff. And the left is scared. They're really scared. So I'm going to skip on down to verse 10. And the Philistines said, "I defy the armies of Israel this day. Give me a man that we may fight together." And it's interesting also that it wasn't that long ago that Soleimani himself taunted President Trump I think it was in an interview or something. I'd have to go back and look at where I found that. But he recently just taunted Donald Trump, and now he's torn into hundreds of pieces from a reaper bomb of ours. But anyways, verse 11, when Saul and Israel heard those words of the Philistine, they were dismayed and greatly afraid. Now you look at the Israelites back then, they're really no different than many Americans today. When people taunt us and they shout at us, we always have one side, the cowardly side, that says we better just not do anything about it because we're just going to make them more mad, and then they're going to attack us more. That's the mentality. Well, if you have that mentality all the time, what do you think a bully's going to do? He's going to keep picking on you until he's controlling your entire life. And that was the strategy of the Iranians. It has been the strategy of the Iranians for decades now, is they would just bully and carry out different attacks upon us, directly and indirectly, and taunt our leaders, and basically, taunt with all-out war if we do something about it. And our leaders basically just keep saying, let's not do anything about it. Let's just. Obama gave him was it $2 trillion in cash?
I think it was in the billions, but yeah.
Something like that, yeah, or billions. He gave him a big cargo plane full of cash to try to make a deal with him, and anyways, that would be like the Israelites here paying off the Philistine Goliath. Do you think he's going to go away? He's going to come back again and taunt the Israelites if that were to happen. And the Philistine, I'm going to jump on down to verse 16 here. And the Philistine drew near morning and evening and presented himself 40 days, taunting, saying, "What are you going to do about it?" And as verse 23, skipping on down a little bit more, and as he talked with them, this is David now in the scene, he's talking to his brothers. "Behold, there came up the champion, the Philistine of Gath, Goliath by name, out of the armies of the Philistines, and spake according to the same words, and David heard them. And the men of Israel, when they saw the man, fled from him, and they were sore afraid. And David said to Saul, Let no man's heart fail because of him. Thy servant will go and fight with this Philistine. And Saul said to David, Thou art not able to go against this Philistine to fight with him, for thou art but a youth, but he a man of war from his youth." I have no doubt Donald Trump probably heard many advisors say this to him. The Iranians have been at these tactics for many, many years, and they're very good at it. And it's best that we just not do anything about it. We'll just placate him, we'll pay him off, we'll bribe him, whatever the case may be. Verse 34, "And David said unto Saul, Thy servant kept his father's sheep, and there came out a lion and a bear, and took a lamb out of the flock. And I went out after him, and smote him, and delivered it out of his hand. And when he arose against me, I caught him by the beard, and smote him, and slew him." So in other words, David's saying, hey, I've had some past experience with monsters in my lifetime, with beasts, and such as the lion and the bear, and I defeated these beasts. So I'm ready to take on the next beast that comes my way, the next monster. Verse 36, "Thy servant slew both the lion and the bear, and this uncircumcised Philistine shall be as one of them, seeing he hath defied the armies of the living God." Now that's the kind of talk that God loves, God desires, courageous talk. I'm not talking about just going around and picking on people and stuff like that, like the Iranian. But if somebody's picking on you, taunting you day in and day out, such as a nation or whatever, God expects us to have some Davids around that will stand up and say, enough's enough. Now, like Donald Trump said, I've got 52 targets. If you dare attack one of ours, I'm going to attack 52 of these important targets in your country. This is a biblical reaction, is my point. And those on the left will say, oh, he threw matches in a powder keg and stuff like that, or dynamite in a powder keg, and they're all just so afraid. But anyways, here we go. And when the Philistine looked about and saw David and disdained him, for he was but a youth and ruddy and of a fair countenance. I will say this, it's interesting, it says fair and ruddy here. David was fair complected, no doubt. He was either blondish, reddish hair. And the Philistine didn't like that for some reason. You know, you got, I just saw in the news what's his name, Kaepernick. He tweeted that, oh, here we go, nothing new again. Americans are now, Americans in the American Army, I'm trying to remember his exact words, they're now targeting brown skin and black skin people, you know, with their military might, as though this is some kind of a racist thing, like as though Donald Trump's over there saying, hey, they're brown skin over there, so let's just start killing some of them. I mean, it's totally ridiculous. We have many different allies of brown skin and black skin. It has nothing to do with that. But they always try to say it's some racial thing. I just point that out because the Philistine didn't like David because he was a white, fair-complected individual. So you see where the racism usually comes from. It comes from the other side, trying to project that upon us. Verse 43, and the Philistine said unto David, am I a dog that thou comest to me with staves? And the Philistine cursed David by his gods. And the Philistine said to David, come to me, and I will give thy flesh unto the fowls of the air and to the beasts of the field. And I just saw on some of Donald Trump's tweets, you know, there were some tweets there in other languages of the profile names. It looked like Iranian language or something. And they were showing these little video clips. They were trying to scare Donald Trump or scare us, and they're showing all these video clips of Iran just bombing all of our aircraft carriers out in the sea and all this, like it's supposed to really frighten us, as though they have that kind of military sophistication to be able to do that. If they had that kind of sophistication, Iran would have already used it against us. That's the point. And so, but a normal individual, I shouldn't say normal individual, but leftist today, or many of David's brothers back here, or David's kinsmen, they were scared of the Philistines' taunts. But it didn't faze David. So my point is we might start hearing it on the mainstream media here in the coming weeks, how fearful we should be of Iran now, and how we should. And Donald Trump just did the most terrible thing by taking out this Iranian general, and now the world's going to end. But as we see here, it didn't end with when David attacked the Philistine. It actually led to victory here. Verse 45, and David said to the Philistine, thou comest to me with a sword and with a spear and with a shield, but I come to thee in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel, whom thou hast defied. And I'll just say another interesting point, though Donald Trump isn't known to be the greatest Christian, he's at least acknowledged publicly that we are a nation that doesn't worship the government. We worship God. And he repeats, in God we trust all the time. And he's done more for the evangelical Christian community, I should say, the biblical Christian community, than any other president in our lifetime. Even those who we thought were really moral characters. Anyways, skipping on down to verse 51. Therefore David ran and stood upon the Philistine. This was after he after he hit him with the stone. I had to just skipping it for brevity because most of you already know this story. David ran and stood upon the Philistine and took his sword and drew it out of the sheath thereof and slew him and cut off his head therewith. And when the Philistines saw their champion was dead, they fled. Okay? they fled. And the men of Israel and Judah arose and shouted and pursued the Philistines until thou come to the valley and to the gates of Ekron, and the wounded of the Philistines fell down by the way to Sha'arim, even unto Gath and unto Ekron. Now I believe with the way things are going right now, and the type of president we have right now, I believe this is more likely the outcome of what we may see with Iran, is we took down their champion and we're going to just take out more of their power structure. And I wouldn't even doubt if we see the Iranian people themselves during President Trump's presidency rise up and actually take back their country. Because many people don't realize it, but when was it, in the 70s, that this current Iranian regime took over? Before they took over, Iran was an ally to us. Who was it? The Shah of Iran was assassinated, I believe, in the 70s, and then the Ayatollah Khomeini took over. I believe this is the second or third one, I can't remember. But anyways, those were the hardcore Islamic extremists that took over, that killed the Shah of Iran, which was an American ally. They took over, turned that country to its extremism that it's at right now. But there are a lot of Iranians that want to go back to how they used to be under the Shah of Iran. So, anyways, let me see here. I'll just point out again, the whole point of bringing this study up was to see if what Donald Trump did by taking out their leader was a biblical, righteous thing to do, or was it an evil thing to do. And I believe it was very similar to I believe it was a biblical reaction, because we see the example of David, how he handled the Philistine who taunted the Israelites, and so on. Any questions or comments?
I just think that it's a wonderful thing that we have a president that doesn't back down. Like, was it with Iran when Obama drew the line in the sand, basically, and then they crossed the line and he didn't do anything about it? And I mean, that kind of attitude gets you in trouble, because countries think they can push past your limits and you're not going to do anything because you're too afraid of upsetting things or whatever. But I have no doubt that the countries of the world are afraid of us again, knowing that Trump's in there and seeing that he's the ability to do those kinds of things and not hesitate.
Well, and he's actually also, I failed to mention in the study, he's showing a lot of restraint. If you remember, they took down our drone. They, I don't know if they shot a rocket at it or something like that, I can't remember. But they took down one of our expensive drones. They did a couple other things too, and everybody expected Trump to react right away, but he didn't. He just said, hey, you know what? I think he ended up bombing some of their, what did he bomb? He bombed something of theirs. But there were no casualties, I think. He was trying to just give a little equal measure of punishment. Hey, you took down our drone, we'll take down something equal, but we're not going to take that. We're not going to kill anybody for a drone. And so, in other words, he showed a lot of restraint up until finally it got to the point where they were trying to make another Benghazi out, make this look like another Benghazi. And there was what was going on, I think, was a lot more sophisticated than we might think. And it was a huge deal, and it had to be stopped, because them attacking the embassy like that was an attempt to foment revolution in Iraq and get Iraq to blame America and hate America, and all the lives we lost there would be in vain if we just let them take over.
I mean, I think he's shown the perfect balance so far of restraint and non-restraint. The Iran has been shouting death to America for as long as I can remember. This isn't going to change anything. They still hate us. They still want us dead. And now they maybe have a little more fear in them.
Yeah.
People that say that, oh, we're going to go to war, we're going to, do all this. Nothing has changed.
Right.
Other than one of their main officials is dead, and the next guy stepping up might think twice about it.
Yeah, good point. Yeah, nothing. It's not going to get them to. They're not just going to stop on their own, but now they know if they hit us, they're going to get hit back. So.
And the fact that Obama gave them billions of dollars in cash, flew it on the tarmac of their airport and just left it there. I mean, it just goes to show the complete difference in strategies and ideals and values, and these guys are our worst enemy. They hate us and they want us dead. And even after we gave them the money and stuff, their leaders were in their whatever version of Congress they have, still saying death to America,
right.
America's the devil, and it's just it just blows my mind how certain side of our country are just clueless to proper or what to do. I mean, it's I don't know, just amazing.
Yeah. Yeah, and like I said, I mean, we're losing manliness in America at the same time, too. Men are becoming so effeminate and weak and basically becoming kind of this is a whole other topic for another time, but they're basically becoming like the way they portray them in the comedies these days as just kind of the worthless guy that's just kind of there, and he doesn't really have a purpose or any kind of responsibility in our culture. But anyways, I won't get into that discussion.
Overcomers is brought to you by the tithes and offerings of our listeners. If you would like to support our ministry, please go to ChristianOvercomers.com. God bless you, and thank you for your support.
Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord. He is trampling out the vintage where the grapes of wrath are stored. He has loosed the fateful lightning of his terrible sword. His truth is marching on.